The 2025 regular season is officially in the books for the Oregon Ducks, and they're certainly playoff bound. We've also got coaching news. Will Stein to Kentucky. We're going to talk all about it next. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Soder Report. My name is Kyle Soder. I'm the host here on the channel. Thank you all for tuning in and listening to my thoughts on the Oregon Ducks throughout the season. It's been a great season, and I'm so excited for this upcoming playoff. Please, if you're just tuning in for the first time, hit the like button below, subscribe to the channel to get more content on Oregon football. Today, we've got a packed show. We're going to get into the coaching news. Obviously, that's huge news right now. All around college football, as a matter of fact. We're going to talk a little bit about early National Signing Day. Just dip our toe into the water there. We're going to get into the college football playoff ranking, try to preview what that might look like and what the playoff scenarios could be for Oregon. And then, as always, injuries a big factor for the past month or so of the season. Ever since the Wisconsin game, they've been a big factor, unfortunately. So, again, please hit the like button, subscribe to get more Oregon content. All right. So, yesterday, Will Stein takes the head coaching job at the University of Kentucky, and Tosh is heavily rumored to be far and away the favorite for the Cal head coaching job. So, I was actually pretty surprised about Will Stein going to Kentucky. I did not expect his first head coaching job to come at the Power 4 level, and certainly not in the Southeastern Conference. That was a big surprise to me. That being said, it is a fit. His parents are alumni of University of Kentucky, and he grew up as a big fan of that school. He played college football at Louisville. He was the backup quarterback behind Teddy Bridgewater, I believe it or not. And yeah, now he's got his dream job. So, first of all, congratulations to Will Stein. He's led a great offense the past few years. So, huge thanks to him. Congratulations, Will Stein. And I hope that he goes and succeeds at his next job. Now, the first thing that comes to mind for Oregon fans is obviously the Lane Kiffin situation. That didn't go super well at Ole Miss. For those of you who don't know, Lane Kiffin accepted the head coaching job at Louisiana State at LSU. And he will not be coaching the Ole Miss Rebels as they make their playoff run, which is just insane. Some people say it exposes how flawed the college football schedule is. I think that it's been exposed many times for a lot of different reasons. The transfer portal is in the wrong spot. The early National Signing Day window is in the wrong place. There's so many things wrong with the college football schedule. But that's the first thing that comes to mind, is the nightmare scenario is that Will Stein goes over to Kentucky, leaves immediately, tries to take as much of Oregon staff with him, tries to take players with him, sort of the way Lane Kiffin did. And I know there's more to that story, but we're not going to get too deep into that. But that is not the case here. Will Stein is although he has accepted the head coaching job at Kentucky, he will remain the offensive play caller for Oregon throughout the college football playoff. And he will be the offensive coordinator until Oregon's season officially comes to a close. So that's really good news, is Oregon is not going to have to pivot to a new offensive play caller right as the college football playoff is starting. So that's really fortunate news for Oregon. It gives them a better chance of winning games in the playoff, and hopefully they can make one last deep postseason run. Now, when we look past the playoff, when we look at who could possibly replace Will Stein, there's a lot of talk about promoting from within. That's not really, I don't really get that sense. I don't think that there's someone on staff that has been groomed and prepared for an offensive coordinator position. I don't think that there is someone on the staff who is prepared to call plays every game. So I think that they're going to go outside of the organization, and there have been some crazy names that have been thrown out there. Obviously, Chip Kelly back to Eugene to be the offensive coordinator for the Oregon Ducks is the dream. It's the dream. That's just it. I grew up, and Chip Kelly's Oregon program made me a fan of the team. I grew up during Marcus Mariota, LaMichael James, Demaryius Thomas, so I have very, very fond memories of Chip Kelly. I don't expect that that's the route that they're going to go. I've heard a lot of rumors about Brian Hartline, and I don't expect that to come to fruition either. Just because there's flights going from Columbus to Eugene does not mean Brian Hartline is going to be the offensive coordinator for Oregon. He might bring some great recruits if that happened, but how good of an offensive play caller is he? And how well can he scheme up an offense? So I wouldn't really expect either of those to happen. One of my guesses would be the offensive coordinator at University of North Texas. He's done a really good job. You could also look at, this is just following the blueprint of what they did last time. They hired Will Stein from UTSA. So they could do that again. They could look to replace their offensive coordinator spot with someone who has succeeded at the G5 level again. But I think that Oregon is in a very good spot with this opening. I think that they have created a very desirable position. They have had Heisman finalists multiple years in a row. They've had one of the best offenses in the nation multiple years in a row. They've got top 5 recruiting classes multiple years in a row. It's an enviable place to be. So I have no doubt in my mind that Oregon is going to have candidates lined up to wanting to take a spot at Oregon. Not only do they have all that, the last 2 offensive coordinators have gone on to get head coaching jobs at the Power 4 level. So I don't think that they're going to have any problem finding a qualified individual for their new offensive coordinator opening. And I also don't think that Will Stein leaving is going to have huge recruiting impact. Maybe you lose Austin Novosad. Bryson Beaver has already stated that he's going to stay committed to the Oregon Ducks. I just don't see Will Stein leaving causing a bunch of recruiting waves for Oregon's 2026 class. Maybe you lose a guy like Cooper Perry or Mekhi Hughes or Dink Riggs. Maybe you lose one of those guys, but I don't think anyone who's getting on the field for Oregon is going to leave, go to Kentucky so that they can be with Will Stein. I just don't see that happening. The other big coaching news is Tosh Lupoi. He is far and away, the most likely candidate for the Cal opening, the Cal head coach opening. So, if that happens, I would expect it to be a lot like Will Stein. I don't think that Tosh Lupoi would leave and then try to take staff and players with him on the way out before the college football playoff. I think that it would be the exact same. I think he could accept the Cal head coaching job, stay right in Eugene until the postseason is over, and then move over to Cal. I think he'd continue to call plays, he'd continue to game plan, all of that stuff. I just don't see him I just don't see him trying to nuke Oregon's playoff chances. However, after that, I actually do believe that there is an internal candidate who has been developing, and is probably ready to step into that defensive coordinator spot. And that is Chris Hampton. He was the recruiter of the year last year, bringing in Naeem Offord, Brandon Finney. He brought in the best defensive back haul Oregon's program has ever seen. And he was promoted to co-defensive coordinator so that he would get interviews for defensive coordinator positions at the Power 4 level. And maybe he was getting a bunch of interviews and maybe he just wasn't selected, or maybe he didn't like the openings that were available to him. But if Tosh Lupoi leaves, that would leave Oregon's defensive coordinator position open. So, logically thinking through this, you've got a co-defensive coordinator. He's probably learned quite a bit from Tosh Lupoi, I would imagine. And I would imagine that he is ready to step into the defensive coordinator spot and call plays. Now, if that doesn't happen and they want to go with someone who has a better knowledge of defensive scheme, then sure, Oregon's defensive coordinator spot would also be an extremely favorable position for anyone to get themselves into. I would imagine that, just like I said with the offensive coordinator position, Oregon would have a long line of people trying to get that Oregon defensive coordinator spot because of how good of a place the program is in right now. And it's just a great place to be in as a fan, I've got to say. So, those are my thoughts on the offensive and defensive coordinator position. I wouldn't expect anything crazy dramatic to happen at Oregon's program this year. Will Stein is sticking around. I would imagine Tosh Lupoi does the same. And I think that next year you replace both of them with highly capable individuals who are ready to call plays offensively and defensively and put together great schemes. I don't have a lot of panic losing either of these guys, even though they have done a great job for Oregon's program. Okay, so one last thing to watch for just with this is how focused are they going forward. I would imagine that Will Stein and Tosh Lupoi were both taking interviews the past couple of weeks. And the offense has looked completely fine. the defense struggled a little bit against USC, but they looked great again against Washington. So now that Will Stein actually has a head coaching job somewhere, it's a little bit different because his future is completely secure at this point. So that's just something to keep an eye on as we move into the playoffs. Is there going to be a lapse in focus from either of the coordinators as we go throughout the playoffs? Okay. Really quick, just want to touch really quick on early National Signing Day. I believe it opens tomorrow. There have been a couple of guys that Oregon has been pursuing, trying to flip. And it seems like Dan Lanning always has something up his sleeve for these early National Signing Days. Last year it was Naeem Offord. Everyone thought that he was sticking with Ohio State. Also last year, Dallas Wilson. I know he didn't end up at Oregon, but on early National Signing Day, he signed with the Ducks. And then sort of the same thing goes for Jaren Kiawe Sagapolotele. That also didn't turn out. So I guess what we come away with here is Dan Lanning is going to get someone that we don't quite expect. But just because they sign on early National Signing Day does not mean they will be on the roster next year. They could just ask for a release 2 weeks after early signing day, which is not how it should work, but that's just how college football works right now. But I just wanted to share a couple of names that potentially we could be watching for. One is Chris Henry Jr. at Ohio State. Oregon was pursuing him 7 months ago, something like that. He's been committed to Ohio State since 2023. I think the chances of him flipping are very low, especially because Oregon pursued him so they were trying really hard to flip him 6 or 7 months ago. And he shut down his recruitment back then. Oregon has seemingly tried to pick things up with him again, leading into National Signing Day. We'll see what happens. I wouldn't get my hopes up for him, but that's just a name to keep an eye on. Second one is Ryder Lyons. Now, like I said, Oregon already has a 4-star quarterback in Bryson Beaver in this class. Ryder Lyons is a 5-star commit, currently committed to BYU. Oregon was one of 2 finalists. He chose BYU over Oregon. And he's going to serve a 1-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, I bring his name up partly because Oregon was so close to getting that recruitment. Also partly because Kalani Sitake's name is now starting to be thrown around in a bunch of head coaching rumors, specifically with Penn State. So I personally, if I had to put money on it, I would bet that Kalani Sitake stays at Brigham Young, and I would also expect that Jared Curtis stays at Brigham Young as well. However, Ryder Lyons did visit Autzen Stadium against USC, and if there were something to happen with the head coaching search, then Oregon would be a really easy pivot for him. So, Ryder Lyons, 5-star quarterback, another name to keep an eye on. By the way, Jared Curtis just flipped from Georgia to Vanderbilt. That was another guy Oregon was in on, and just decided to flip today. So, another name is defensive lineman Deuce Gerald's, committed to LSU. Again, some coaching turnover. I would expect that he's more excited to play for Lane Kiffin than Brian Kelly, but who knows, maybe there was someone on that staff he was connected to and is now out of a job at LSU. So that's another name to watch. A couple of names to watch for Oregon flipping away. I would say the two biggest ones that are in danger, I guess, of flipping away from Oregon are Jalen Lott and Tank Jones. First, Tank Jones, he's from Alabama, grew up rooting for the Crimson Tide, and sort of always dreamed of playing in the Southeastern Conference. Oregon came in and convinced him one way or another to go up to Eugene, play in the Big Ten. 5-star edge rusher, I believe. So that's one to watch. I believe he's been taking some visits with some other schools. We'll see what happens. And then the second one, Jalen Lott, 5-star receiver. They call him athlete, but he's going to be a receiver. Texas has been pushing really hard for Jalen Lott, and I believe Miami has been in on his recruitment as well, trying to flip him away from Oregon. So that's all I'm going to talk about for early National Signing Day. Dan Lanning usually comes up with some sort of surprise. So we'll see what happens, and even if something unexpected happens on early National Signing Day, it doesn't mean that person is going to be on the roster next year. All right, let's get into college football playoff scenarios. Sorry, just getting over a cold. What a week to miss a Tuesday and Saturday podcast. There's so much to get to. All right, so the college football playoff ranking. A couple of matchups to watch for this conference championship weekend. First of all, tonight the new rankings will come out, and the big one to watch for is Texas A&M. Where does Texas A&M fall to? Their resume is not good. They've got a win over Notre Dame, which is a great win, and that's pretty much it. I don't believe they have another ranked win at all this year. I could be wrong on that. I should double check that. But I'm going to assume that Texas A&M falls behind Oregon. And Oregon moves up to number 5. Okay. So Texas A&M lost to Texas, and then the only ranked team that they have beat is Notre Dame. Yeah, that's their only ranked win so far. So their resume is not the greatest. I believe they'll fall back behind Oregon. It would make sense if they fall in front of Mississippi, because Ole Miss might get the Lane Kiffin ding, I guess. So maybe they fall to 6 and Oregon moves up to 5. Now, games that would have implications for Oregon is the Georgia versus Alabama matchup in the SEC championship game. If Georgia loses, does Oregon slide up into the 4 spot and get a first round bye? Texas Tech versus BYU, same thing. If Texas Tech loses, does Oregon slide up and get a first round bye? Now, I am scarred for life after events that took place on New Year's Day earlier this year, and I never, ever want Oregon to have a first round bye ever again in the history of their program. I don't even want to talk about it because I'm starting to get flashbacks to Vietnam. So I am really hoping that Oregon just slides into a 5 or 6 spot, hosts a first round playoff game against a group of 5 school or the ACC champion. And I think that's the best case scenario for Oregon. The ACC champion, by the way, it's Duke versus Virginia. If Duke wins that game, then there might be 2 group of 5 schools that get into the college football playoff. It could be the winner of the American Conference, which will be either North Texas or Tulane, or it could be James Madison from the Sun Belt. So those are if Duke wins, that's something to watch for, is do 2 group of 5 schools get into the college football playoff. So I would guess that Oregon slides up to number 5 tonight. And assuming they stay there, they would play the 12 seed, which most likely would be whoever wins the American Conference, either Tulane or North Texas. I would guess that Virginia wins the ACC and takes the 11 seed. So if that holds, Oregon would play Tulane or North Texas for the right to play the number 4 seed, which would most likely be Texas Tech. If they win that game, they would most likely play Ohio State. So that's the way that the path looks to me right now. And honestly, I would prefer the number 6 seed, but I think that that's a perfectly fine path. You get a nice warm-up game. You go and play Texas Tech on a neutral site, which is going to be tough. That's going to be a tough game. And then if you're going to go all the way, you've got to beat Ohio State sometime. So I think that whichever one it is, the 5 or 6 seed, that's the most favorable position to be in the college football bracket. And that exposes the problem with the bracket is I'm sitting here terrified of being one of the top 4 teams. That's a huge problem with the bracket. Is I, as a fan, don't want my team to have a first round bye. I'm rooting for them to lose at least one game in the regular season so that they can get a home playoff game. So that's the issue with the bracket. And I think this is a good time to bring up another thing with the college football bracket. There's a lot of discussion about who should be in the college football playoff. Should it be Texas? Should it be BYU? Should it be Notre Dame? Should it be Vanderbilt? Should it be Utah? And here's what I've got to say. Multiple fan bases are going to be pissed off that their team got left out of the college football playoff. They'll bring up whatever metric, they'll bring up whatever marquee win that they had during the regular season. They'll bring up whatever to say that the college football playoff committee was wrong in leaving them out of the college football playoff. Now, the first thing to remember with the college football playoff is that it was established to make as much money as possible. It was not established to be a perfectly fair bracket for college football playoff teams. It was made so that the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 can make money. And it was made so that everyone else involved in college football can make more money. However, there is an upside to it. And that is, those teams I just mentioned, who are on the bubble, whose fan bases will be pissed if they miss it. I'm talking about Miami. I'm talking about Texas. I'm talking about BYU. I'm talking about Utah. I'm talking about Vanderbilt. At least 3 of those teams are going to miss out on the college football playoff. And they're going to be extremely upset. Now I ask this question. Does Vanderbilt have a realistic shot at winning the national championship? I would say no. Does BYU? I would say no. Does Utah? I would say no. Does Notre Dame? They're in right now, but I would say no. Does Miami? Probably not. So all of these teams on the bubble, they're competing for a playoff spot, but in my mind, they aren't a realistic contender for a national championship. So taking that into consideration, you're not robbing them of a national championship. You're robbing them of a playoff spot where they sneak into the back half, go and play someone like Oklahoma and get kicked around for 3 hours, and then their conference takes a nice check home. So that's really all it is for these teams on the bubble. They're not national championship contenders. We just saw what Georgia did to Texas a couple weeks ago. Texas is not competing for a national championship. So I just felt like this was a good time to bring that up, since the college football playoff is coming out later tonight. Is none of these teams on the bubble are realistically competing for a national championship. Okay, let's close with injuries. Unfortunately, I talk about injuries on every show, it seems like. I am extremely concerned about Decorian Moore at this point. Oregon played Wisconsin on October 25th. That's the last game that we've seen Decorian Moore play. The first round of the college football playoff, I believe, is December 19th. Okay. Yeah, December 19th. So if Decorian Moore plays in that game, it will be his first game in 2 months that he's played. So I talked a lot the past few weeks about wanting to get Evan Stewart back into the wide receiver rotation so that he could knock off some of the rust that he's undoubtedly accumulated over the past year. And that was really important that Evan Stewart had 3-ish games to be able to do that before the playoffs. Obviously, throw Evan Stewart, just push him to the back of your mind, because even if he gets back for the first round of the playoff, he's not going to be himself. He's not going to be the Evan Stewart we remember. Decorian Moore, it was reported that he just tweaked his knee over the bye week. And here we are over a month later, and he still hasn't played a football game. So what was this knee tweak? Because it was originally reported as an ACL. And that sent everyone into a panic. And then the knee tweak thing came out a couple days later. Those were Dan Lanning's words, is a knee tweak. So you hear knee tweak and you just think, okay, couple of weeks, he'll be back, he'll be playing. But this was obviously a lot more severe if it's kept him out for a month. And with him missing the Washington game, I'm sort of starting to put him into the same boat as Evan Stewart. If DeCorian Moore comes back, I wouldn't expect him to be himself for his first game back. I wouldn't expect him to have 8 receptions for 120 yards in his first game back. That's just not, it's not a realistic expectation, and it's not a fair expectation to DeCorian Moore to just be able to play like a polished receiver when he's been rehabbing for almost 2 months. So I am concerned. I am very concerned about the injuries in the wide receiver room as a whole. This goes for Gary Bryant Jr. as well. His was an ankle injury. Looking back on it, it's probably a high ankle sprain. And he missed the rest of the season. So Gary Bryant Jr. wasn't the biggest contributor before he got injured. So I wouldn't, if he gets back, I would expect him to slide into a similar role. But with DeCorian Moore, he was one of the featured guys. I just don't think he can be a featured guy in the offense his first game back. So all the more reason that a home playoff game against Tulane is the best path through the playoff. So your guys can knock the rust off. Your guys getting back from injury can knock the rust off. And hopefully when you go play Texas Tech or whoever it is in that second round, your guys are fresh. Your guys are ready. Your guys got a chance to knock the rust off and are ready to go and play a great team. So the wide receiver room I'm very concerned about at this point. I think that those injuries were a lot more serious than they were originally reported to be. However, there is good news on the injury front. Poncho was back at center. Isaiah World was playing at left tackle. So the offensive line looks like it's going to be okay. I know Poncho didn't have his best game. He looked like a guy who was hampered by an injury. But give him 3 weeks, I think Poncho's. I've got no concerns about the offensive line. Just the wide receiver room I am really worried about at this point. One of the longer shows. It was packed. That's going to be it for today. The college football playoff rankings come out tonight. Comment below. Let me know where you think Oregon should be. And if you agree with me that their path through the playoff is a lot more favorable than it was last year. So that's going to be it. Please hit the like, subscribe to the channel. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.